Okay, next up in the system menu is the timer. So let's go in and take a look at that. Now, there's two timers in this radio that you can set, and by default, both are inactive. So I'm just going to do one because the other one sets up the same. So the first thing you want to do if you want to use a timer is we need to activate it. So make sure that this is enabled or highlighted, and click activate, and that activates it. But that does not mean the timer is going to actually start or work. We have to set the other parameters here before we can do that. So the first thing is the amount of time. Well, I'll just set mine for 5 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes. And then we have to decide whether we want it to count up from 0 to 5 or down from 5 to 0. Most people like countdown, which is the default, so that's what we'll use. But if you want to change it, you can change it to up. All right, the next thing is how to activate, or not activate, but how to start the timer. We've got all this set, but it isn't going to start because we've got it set to null, which means nothing is starting the timer. So we have to change that. So instead of using null, we come over here to the button that says null, and it says off, and of course it's off because we have no way to activate it. And we're going to change the switch. So we hit select. Now what shows is on the radio, changing switches is what you want to do. I'll talk about THR or throttle later, but let's just say I want my timer to start with switch B. All right, let's just use that as an example. So I'm going to hit B over here, all right, and then I'm going to hit exit, and it's going to come to switch B, and it's going to still say off, and you notice switch B isn't turning it. Oops, I had this, wait a minute, 1 second. Anyway, by default, this was off, so notice switch B is still not turning it on. I was playing around with the radio. Sorry, guys, this should have been, by default, this is off. So what we want to do is we want to say, hey, do I want the timer to start when I go down or when I go up? Well, I like all my switches up, so if I was to do this with this switch, what I do is down would start it and up would stop it. But that's what we'll do. So as you can see, when I toggle the switch, it changes on the screen. And so I want down to be on. So I'm going to click down here. I'm going to say on, which it was set to. Sorry about that. Anyway, now watch. When I flip the switch, now the timer says on. And it says off. So let's see what happens on our display. Let's go back to the main display where it shows the timer. Let me reset that for a minute. All right, so it starts at 5. I flip switch B down. Notice it's counting down just as I said. All right. If I want to reset the timer back to 0, just hold down and it'll reset. If I just touch, it goes into my timer menu. Again, if I want to reset, hold down. All right. There we go. And flip down, and it's counting down. All right, so pretty straightforward. But let's take a look at another feature here, actually. I'll just go into the timer this way. Let's say I don't want to use a switch. So I'm going to go in here, and let's say, so I'm going to go select. And let's say instead of a switch, I want throttle position to start my timer. Now, this video is going to go a little longer because it takes some time to figure that out. But we're going to say instead of a switch, we're going to use the throttle. And right now, as you see, throttle on, throttle off. There's a percent, by the way. Once again, I think this will default to off because I've already changed it. So when I move the throttle stick right now, nothing's happening. So I have to say, when do I want the throttle to turn on? The timer. All right, so let's go down here and let's say on. All right, now you'll notice low stick, it's on. If I raise the stick, it turns off. Well, that's not what we want. So let's go back off here and let's go on here. All right, so now it still says off. I'm going to raise the throttle, and you notice it comes on. Now, where you want the throttle to come on, you can do that percent. So right now, it's basically when it's at 0, it's off. So I'm at 0. And the minute I move it at all, it will turn on. All right, so you see that? The minute I move it. But let's say I don't want it to turn on until I get to, say, half stick or something. So I can set the stick at half. I press this, and I go set. Basically, I was close to half. It's 49%. So now, at low stick, you notice it isn't turning on until I pass 49%, and then it turns on. As you see, I passed 49%, it's on. And again, it will turn off as you pass back through there. All right, so that's basically how to hook it to the throttle. Now, I will talk about later when you're setting a throttle curve when you're in idle up, because it's using the throttle channel to detect, not the pitch channel, it won't actually turn off in idle up. I'll show you that. All right, so if you're saying, well, gee, I don't want my timer to turn off every time I go low stick, the idea behind that is if you're in normal and you're actually going to low throttle, you probably do want your timer to shut off. Your motor's not running, right? So that's pretty cool. But if you're an idle up, every time you go negative and want to fly inverted, you don't want the timer to shut off, and therefore your throttle curves will handle that for you. All right, hope that made sense. So I'm going to set mine to a little bit above 8% to start the timer, and there we go. And of course, when I go to land, the timer will stop. So let's go look at the screen on that. Okay, I'm going to reset the timer. All right, 5 minutes. I'm going to increase throttle, and once I get above 8%, you'll see the throttle, you'll see the timer start counting down. If I reduce the stick all the way, you'll see it will stop. And again, later when we set up an idle up throttle curve, we can keep that timer running. All right, so that's basically the timer menu, and we'll continue on. Okay, next up in the system menu is the channel assignment menu. Now, this radio allows you to move anything on any channel. So, back when we were talking about receivers and stuff, when it says when it says a CH1 here, that means whatever's controlling CH1 will be channel 1 coming out of your receiver. Okay, so let's make sure you understand that. Right now, by default, this is aileron. So if I move the aileron stick left and right, the servo that will be affected is what is plugged into channel 1 of your receiver. Making sense so far? But you can change that. Let's say you want this to be rudder. I can come in here, and I can say select, and I can say I want that to be rudder. All right, so we'll just select that. All right, now you see it says rudder. But notice it switched to J4. So what I want to do is I want to say, no, wait a minute, I wanted rudder on J1, not J4, which is its default. And we hit set. Now it says rudder's on J1. So when I move this channel, all right, even though the label's rudder, it's still going to move whatever I have plugged into channel 1. So don't confuse yourself by these labels. The label is just a label. The channel is the channel. So now if I change channel 1 to be controlled by, let's say I did want that to be J4, which by default is this over here, all right, and I hit select. Now here's the difference. Channel 1 is the output on this receiver. Now, when I move this stick, it isn't going to move that channel 1 output. When I move this stick, which is J4, that will actually move the servo that I have plugged into channel 1. I don't care what you label this. You can label this pitch if you wanted to. All right, hit set. And then change this back to J4, select J4, and hit set. Even though it says pitch, it's what I want to call it. The stick J4 will move the channel 1 output. All right? Hope that makes sense. I'm going to set this back to default. I'm going to hit J1, and I'm going to hit set. And then I'm going to change this to aileron, and actually you'll see it move stuff around a little bit. So J1's now back to aileron as a default. Now, I'm going to talk about an advantage here to some extent about, I think my timer started, yep. Sorry, the beeps, turn that off. I'm going to talk something about a little bit of an advantage you can do here. The way the processor calculates inside, these first channels are a higher priority than the end channels. All right, so some people have talked about latency with this radio and whatnot. And what you might want to think about is the throttle servo usually isn't that important. Usually you're running an idle up curve or something that's flat on electric, or you've got a governor taking care of you here. You're having channel 3 as throttle as a priority probably is not the best thing on especially on a CCPM helicopter. So what you might, pardon me, what you might want to do is say, I'm going to change this. The 3 important servos on a helicopter, aileron, elevator, and pitch, they control your swash plate. Might be good to give them a higher priority. So I'm going to go in here to throttle, I'm going to hit set, and I'm going to change it to pitch. All right, and I'm going to hit set. And by the way, notice it changed it to the J1 channel automatically. Remember, J1, I'm sorry, it changed it to J1 because I was messing around. But I need to change this to my pardon me, back here, I need to look, pitch J1, I messed around here. So rudder's J4, yeah, I need to change this to J3 to be on the same stick as my throttle. All right, So now, and pardon me, because I was demonstrating other things, that's what happened. So I changed my pitch to J3, but look over here, I still got pitch over here on this channel, and we don't want to be burning up 2 channels. So channel 5, let me make sure that's 5, yep, channel 5 or 6, now I can change this to be my throttle. So let me go throttle. All right, so I'm just showing you how to switch things around, and I also want that on J3, which is the throttle stick. So now what I've done is I've moved pitch so that the output of the pitch servo is now on channel 3. By default, it was on channel 6, which is a lower priority channel. I've now moved my 3 CCPM servos to channel 1, channel 2, and channel 3. Aileron, elevator, pitch. Pitch is on channel 3, and J3 is activating it. My throttle now is on channel 6, all right? And J3 is still activating. That's what we want. Remember, pitch and throttle use the same stick. And so now what we've done is we've changed around the servos to get those important servos on a higher priority. All right, so that's something you can do by moving stuff around. Maybe make things feel a little better, a little faster. Little caveat, though. I have not yet gone through all the menus to see whether they're affected properly when making this change. So things like pitch curves or something or whatever may get tweaked by this. We'll find out as we go through. All right, but anyway, this is just how to use channel function and what you can do. And since this is mainly focused on helicopters, I just showed you how to make your 3 first servos the priority servos, since throttle does not need to be. Anyway, hope that makes sense. We'll continue on.